So I'm sitting outside HTEK Performance, going to take the 335 IS on the dyno. I think they have a Mustang Dynos MD-250. It's a two-wheel drive dyno, so got here a little early. They're not open yet, so should be fun today. We'll figure out what's going on and see what the baby's making. All right, so getting the car bolted down on the dyno, or strapped down. Go through the different runs of the different tunes and then swap out the intake and do it again. See what we come up with.
So it's down 4 horsepower and 8 horsepower.
Okay, so that was inspirational and informative. Did probably about 8 runs. Got them all written down. But did stock parts, stock flash, turn on the JB4 onto map 1, did a run at that, did map 5 2 runs to see if it's going to learn up or down. It actually kind of learned down. Turned it off, put the JB4 INAO0S pump flash, back end flash, the JB4, and ran that. So I think beginning out, first runs were about 270 at the wheels. JB4 brought it up to about 290. I'm going to get all the printouts and I'll be able to give exact numbers. Once I shut it down after doing the back end flash, I did a map 1. I have it written down, but once, and I think I did the learning map a couple times. And again, stock parts kind of learned its way, seemed to come down and taper off of what I was getting off from map 1. Put the Berger Motorsports dual cone intake and ARM Motorsports blow-off charge pipe with tail cube blow-off valve on, and then ran it with the back end flash on map 1. Got 312 horsepower at the wheels. Put it on the map 5, it pulled a 308. Took the back end flash off, and so JB4 on stock flash brought it down to 291. So there's a 22 horsepower drop compared to the back end flash. That's of course with the cone intakes and the charge pipe. So anyway, it's interesting. It seems like the JB4 and the back end flash really give you a lot of bang for the buck, and I'm going to actually get the printouts and study it and be a little bit more detailed with the reports on it. Alright, so now to talk about the results from the first dyno session in the 2012 335 IS. Completely stock, got a baseline run of 348 foot-pounds of torque and 271 horsepower at the wheels. Just as a note for looking at the next chart, we can see at 4,600 RPM, the torque had already dropped below 300. If we look at this next one here, this is the second run, which was with turning the JB4 on into map 1. We got 291 wheel horsepower, which is a 20 horsepower increase, and 346 foot-pounds of torque, which is a 2 foot-pound torque decrease. But I think the torque is probably the most variable thing I've seen in these runs, and regardless of it being 2 foot-pounds less, it held the torque curve out longer. You can still see it's 300 or slightly above at 4,600 RPM. So that's why the, whatever the JB4 on map 1 was doing with the boost delivery or whatever else it was controlling kept the torque up higher longer, which gave it the higher end result in the horsepower. The next run turned it in, JB4 on the map 5, which is a learning map to see what it do. This result, I'm not sure it wasn't a fluke on the torque part. It showed 374 foot-pounds of torque, which is just a huge jump from the 46. I mean, you're talking about almost 30 foot-pounds of torque, and then dropped off, and the horsepower remained the same. So I don't know if it actually just did feed a bunch of boost in initially and then cut it down, because the very next run, I was thinking that as a fluke, came down to 335. So 374 down to 335, you're talking about almost 40 foot-pound torque, though again, held the curve up nice and longer and netted 291 wheel horsepower. So again, all those were on stock parts. After that, I loaded up the back end flash, and on map 1 with the back end flash, got 301 horsepower at the wheels and 355 foot-pounds of torque. So, about a 7 or 8 foot-pound torque increase over stock, but 30 wheel horsepower over stock just with the back end flash and the JB4 turned on the map 1. I was thinking, and I did my menu selections wrong. I did, looking at my log history, I thought that I did 2 in the learning mode, map 5, but looking at my logs, I actually ended up keeping it in map 1. I was going to see if it would learn up or down, and you can see it went from 355 and 301 to 347, 298. And the second one in there didn't record. So at this point, shut the car down, installed the dual cone intake, and worked it in reverse order. So started with back end flash on map 1, and this was the top result: 371 foot-pounds of torque and 312 wheel horsepower. I guess that one map that the first time we put in map 5 was stock, where it hit 374 foot-pounds of torque, would beat it out in torque, but like again, I find that one a little hard to believe because it's so far off from the other ones. But this was the top power margin here. So jumping from 348 foot-pounds of torque to 371, talking about 23 foot-pounds of torque, and 271 to 312, 41 wheel horsepower by putting the dual cone intake, charge pipe, blow-off valve, and the tune back-end flash plus JB4 on there. I mean, that's the tuning is definitely the best bang for the buck. Coming, just running through, and I actually have a chart of this, but if you look at the final run here, we're at 277 wheels. So this is again back onto the stock flash with the dual cone intake and charge pipe installed. 277 horsepower and 343. So torque's about the same and about 6 horsepower gain. So I have this all thrown down in chart for comparison. With the stock parts, stock flash, these are the numbers: 271 and 348 foot-pounds of torque. Stock flash with JB4 map 1, best run was 291 wheel horsepower and 346 foot-pounds of torque. So it went up about 20 just turning on the JB4, and then adding the back-end flash to that with the stock parts gave about another 10 wheel horsepower and, let's say 9 foot-pounds of torque. After installing the arm charge pipe and tilt cube blow-off valve, went to 277. So you're looking for hardware change about 6 horsepower different, within a 1% margin of error about for foot-pounds of torque, actually showing a little bit of a drop. Part-to-part comparison from stock to with the dual cone intake charge pipe, only about a 1 horsepower increase with just turning on the JB4 map 1. Really no big change there, but jump into with the back-end flash installed, looking at 11 horsepower over what it was with the same flash configuration. So you definitely get the most performance or power gains compared to whether you're going to spend your money on a dual cone intake and charge pipe with tilt cube blow off valve or back end flash with the JB4. You're going to get more power out of the JB4 and the programming, but you're going to get more from your hardware changes coupled with that software change. So it has like a synergistic effect. So if you're looking at it by flash, your horsepower is definitely going to go up for the flashes. Torque came up a little bit, and same thing looking at after we put the parts on, a nice steady rise in power between the more aggressive, from stock to more aggressive flash. Same thing with the torque. Looking at it by parts change, horsepower comparison from stock to flash, stock to parts to having the intake on, and same thing with torque. It actually shows a torque drop on here. Like I said, there's some little inconsistencies. I was trying to get a lot of runs down in a short time. I probably didn't standardize this. At the making of this video I've actually been 2 more times and kind of started realizing to monitor the coolant, oil, and inlet air temperature run to run, and try and start at about the same point on each one to keep it more consistent. So on this one, was definitely a little bit more nervous and new to being on the dyno, and I'm still learning some different things I'll talk about when I post the other videos. But anyway, the final difference, again, going from 271 wheel horsepower to 312, and 348 wheel horsepower to 373 was pretty enjoyable. I did do on the Draggy monitor a run that morning, and got it pulled on the road a 13.98 at 103.79. The one thing I didn't do before I put on for the second dyno, I didn't do it after this, getting this number and this dyno session, going and doing a run. So that's I kind of missed the protocol on that one, but I do have kind of a similar comparison where when I had MHD installed with the same components, it did do a 13.63 at 104.96. So figure maybe a mile an hour and a few tenths of difference on this, maybe a little bit more. So either way, after this, I went back and put on the the intercooler, which I want to post a video on the install on that, and then the second trip to the dyno with those results. So thanks for watching.